So, uh, today I am eating some noodles. It's called chow mein. Chow mein is stir fried noodles. Chow is stir fried, and noodles is mian. So, chow mein. And there's lots of different kinds of stir fried noodles. Uh, in Chinese restaurants in America, you have chow mein. That's the same word, just pronounced slightly different. Um, but this is a little different than that because you can basically stir fry anything in with noodles. And a common thing they do here is take dishes that you might otherwise serve like on rice and do that as a stir fried noodle dish. So this particular thing I'm eating is called Yuxiang Rosa Chow Mein. Um, Yuxiang Rosa is common a common dish here. It's a very popular dish. It's uh, stir fried strips of meat. So just like strips of meat like this with chopped up carrot and a thing called muar. Um, muar is it's like a tree fungus. So mu means tree, and means ear. So it's in English you would call it tree ear. So it's a type of mushroom that grows on trees. Um, and usually it also has some green pepper, but I don't like green pepper, so I picked it out. I tried to order it with. I told them not to put green pepper in it, but they didn't listen to what I said, so they put it in anyway. The restaurant's not that great. Um, but it's not that hard. I just picked out the stuff I didn't want. I'm not a fan of green pepper. Um, the other part of the name of the dish is yuxiang. So rosa is this meat, right? Ro is meat, and su is long strips of things. So this long strip of meat is called rosa, and then yuxiang. Yu means fish. This is a somewhat odd thing because this dish doesn't have fish in it. Xiang means like smell or scented or tasting, and it's called that because it has a type of fish sauce um, in the sauce that they use. So it doesn't taste like fish, but it's called fish scented meat. Actually, the sauce is just like a kind of sweet and tangy um, kind of sauce. It's quite sweet and a little bit spicy and a little bit salty and tangy. Um, I think it is made with fish sauce, so or some kind of fish sauce. So like that's where the name comes from, but it doesn't taste like fish at all. So this dish altogether is called yuxiang, fish scented rosa meat strips, chow mein, stir fried noodles. Mm. And this is a very common thing. There's all kinds of chow mein, stir fried noodles. You can get any kind of, basically any dish that you could get at a restaurant to go with like rice or something. Some restaurant will do it as a stir fried noodle dish. It's convenient for things like a lunch or something when you don't really want a full meal with like a bowl of rice and a dish, you can just get it all like stir fried together. Most places will also do it as a stir fried rice as well with the rice. Um, I felt like having noodles today, so mm. The noodles at this restaurant and in general um, in this part of China are a little bigger than say a spaghetti noodle in America. You can kind of see like they're it's the same type of noodle as like spaghetti. It's a wheat based noodle. They tend to cook it a little more well done. So in the West, people tend to like al dente noodles, like with Italian pasta and stuff. But here they don't really do that. Um, they usually cook it a little more thoroughly. Um, but it's very similar to like if you were making this in America, you could just buy a thing of spaghetti, a box of spaghetti, and use it in the same dish. It would be very nearly the same. Um, so this particular dish is very good for doing as a stir fry with noodles because everything in the dish is long, thin strips. Um, you can get stir fry dishes with other things where like the ingredient that they've put in is more like circle cut things or chunks of things, and I find that tends to not really go so well with it as a stir fry with noodles. So I tend to prefer the dishes that have the long thin strips. Um, this is a pretty popular type of dish to make in the home as well. So I got it from a restaurant, but because often this is a great way to use up leftovers, basically. So people will use this. You just cook up some noodles real quick and then throw in your leftovers and stir fry it together for a minute. And you got yourself a leftover meal. Um, this I had never seen this type of mushroom in America. Um, it's kind of a brown or black um, fungus. I'm not even sure if it's actually a mushroom or just some other kind of fungus. But it's very chewy. Um, it has like a very similar texture to eating cartilage. If you've ever eaten cooked cartilage before, um, it has a very firm bite to it. But then once it snaps, it's snapped and you've chewed into it. Um, so it's very firm at the outset, and then you your teeth cut through it, and then it turns to mush basically. I don't find that it has very much flavor. Here, it's usually used. It's not like a lot of types of mushrooms are in Western cooking and in Chinese cooking. Many kinds of mushrooms are used for because they add a strong flavor to something. So you kind of stir fry mushrooms in with things because they add a strong umami flavor. But these ones, I don't really find that they add much flavor to anything. I think they're more of a texture, and they're very good at holding sauce because of the sort of crinkly crinkly nature of it. Um, and it's in kind of sheets with lots of crinkles on it. If you cook it in any kind of sauce, it holds the sauce really well. So I think it's more just a flavor delivery device in general in most Chinese cooking, and a texture. It has. Chinese cuisine in general quite likes that kind of springy, crunchy, chewy texture. I think in the south of China it's often called Q. I've never heard that term used in the north where I am. Um, but I've seen it in food YouTube videos and things when Southern Chinese are talking about types of food. This dish is usually made with pork. So in Chinese, if you say meat, roe, 9 times out of 10 it means pork. If you don't say it with anything. So the word translates as meat in English, but in context in Chinese, most of the time it should be translated as pork. That's the most common meat that's eaten here, and so like you can tell from the language they don't actually. There is a word for pork. It's called like pig meat, juro. Ju means pig, but no one really ever says that word. They just say meat. And when they say meat, if you want to talk about any other kind of meat, you specify. You say cow meat or chicken meat or you know lamb meat. So for every other kind of meat, you usually specify what animal it comes from. But for pork, you just say meat. And so you can see that in the name of this dish. Where it's not called pork strips, it's called meat strips. Rosa just means meat strips. But if you say this dish to anyone and you ask what meat is in it, they'll tell you it's pork. You can get it other versions at halal restaurants. There's a large Muslim population in China, and at the halal restaurants they'll serve either chicken version of this dish or a beef version, or both, to avoid having the pork. But it's a very sweet sauce. Similar to some of the like Chinese, American Chinese types foods, like General Tso's chicken or orange chicken or kung pao chicken. Those kind of the sauces they have in those dishes. This has a very similar flavor. It's maybe has a potential to be a little bit more sweet and less acidy, like tangy. It doesn't have it. It has a hint of tanginess to it, but not kind of the level that some of those ones will have. And then the other main ingredient is carrots and green peppers. I don't know. This is a dish that's popular in many places in China, but I know it's particularly popular in the north. And those two vegetables, green peppers and carrots, are two of the most popular vegetables to use in any kind of cooking. And there's basically potatoes, carrots, green peppers, eggplant. Those are kind of the main staple vegetables, and cabbage, white cabbage. So this particular dish uses carrots and green peppers, and then these tree ear mushrooms. and then strips of meat. And then with this, they've just done it as a stir fry. I quite like the stir fried noodle kind of dishes and things like that. There's a lot of but various kinds of dishes will have different kinds of noodles with them, and different parts of China have drastically different kinds of noodles. Um, I would say more variety than with Italian. So with Italian pasta, the main variety in Italian pasta is just the shape that it comes in. The material that it's made out of, the sort of the flour and consistency of that. There is some variation within Italian pasta, but the main variation is within the shape rather than within the actual kind of pasta. Whereas within Chinese noodles, the vast majority of differences between different kinds of noodles come in what they're made of and what texture they are, things like that. In general, they do have different shapes. They have flat noodles. They have sort of thin flat noodles. They have wide flat noodles. They have varying sizes of round noodles, from like sort of angel hair size, vermicelli kind of noodles, all the way up to really fat, like almost earthworm size, kind of fat noodles. But that's pretty much the only variation in types of pasta they have. It's either flat noodles or round noodles, in terms of shape. But the main variation comes in terms of what the noodles are made of. In this region, the popular kind of noodle is a wheat noodle that's actually very similar to Italian style pasta, like what spaghetti would be made out of. It's not quite exactly the same, but it's very similar. Whereas, for example, in the South, you might more often have like a rice-based noodle, or we also have rice-based noodles here in the North. Those are, but they're often thicker. So like you can see, this noodle is not quite as thick as my chopstick. The rice noodles they have here are actually thicker than a chopstick. They're very fat, and they're often had in soup. But yeah, so the main but there's tons of different kinds of noodles, and I guess as I order other kinds of noodle dishes, I'll talk about those. But these are very similar to spaghetti. Probably, this is not a super fancy restaurant, so probably what they're doing is buying. Yeah, at the grocery store you can buy just packs of dried noodles, that are basically this kind of noodle, and it's the most common kind of noodle in this part of China. I doubt that this restaurant is making their own noodles. Some restaurants do. Actually, a lot of restaurants do make their own noodles. But this was a pretty cheap, just fast food, quick takeout restaurant, so I don't think they're doing it. And more commonly, if they are making their own noodles, they're doing some other kind of noodles. For example, a very popular kind of noodle here is what's called knife cut noodles, which are a thicker, fatter, flat noodle that are made by having a block of noodle dough and then just chopping the end of it off. So you have a fat rectangle, and you just cut thin strips of rectangle off of the end of your thing of noodle dough. That's probably the most commonly made in the restaurant kind of noodle, or made at home noodle as well. Just because it's easier to make than these kind, you have to put them through a strainer or roll them out or something. Whereas those, you just get a block of and then just chop them real quick. But personally, I like the thin round noodle. I think probably because I grew up with spaghetti, be my guess. But I like the thin round noodles. This dish is actually one of my favorite dishes. Not the stir fried version, but just the dish that, like, just if I go to a Chinese restaurant that just serves standard Chinese dishes or whatever, this is one I'll often order. It's not just me. This is a very popular dish. If you're getting a table full of food for like a group of people, this is almost always going to be on the table. Um, Especially with foreigners. I would say probably there are two things that are almost always, one of them will be on the table. It's either this or the local version of Kung Pao chicken, which in Chinese is called Gong Bao Jiding. But I'll get that another time and talk about that. But for now, I'm having my Yu Xiang Ro Se Chow Mian. I think I'll call it quits there.